Hello viewers, welcome to CEC lectures. Myself Dr. Preeti Jagwani from Department of Computer Science, Aribhat College, University of Delhi. So in our series of operating system, the topic which we are presently learning is about deadlocks, and we have seen couple of lectures about what actually deadlocks is and how are we going to deal with deadlocks. So within that within that sequence, I am going to start today's lecture, which is also about deadlock handling or dealing with deadlocks, we can say. So now in our previous lecture also we have seen that if there is going to be a deadlock in the system, how are we going to tackle that problem. There can be a couple of ways, or there can be, I can say, few ways in which we can deal with deadlock problem. Now what are those ways? Let us recap it quickly and then we will proceed with today's agenda. So in case of if we want to deal with the deadlock problem, there can be couple of things that, like first of all, we can have some system or we can have a protocol in order to prevent or avoid the deadlocks. That means we need to ensure that the system should not enter in a deadlock state. That means we need to prevent the system from entering into the deadlock state. That is one scenario. Another scenario is you allow the system to be in a deadlock state, and then on detection of it, you need to recover your system from the deadlock state. And the next one, or the third idea could be you ignore the problem altogether and you just assume or you just pretend that deadlocks are not going to occur in the system. So first is either prevention or avoidance of deadlock by ensuring that system should not enter there. Second is allow the system to enter and then start the recovery thing, or ignore the problem altogether. Now if we want to take up the first measure, that is we want to prevent or we want to avoid the deadlock, that means we have to have some set of methods for ensuring that at least one of the necessary conditions should not hold. What necessary conditions I am talking about? That means the necessary conditions which are there for occurrence of deadlock. Let me recall that what all those were necessary conditions. Those were, we have seen 4 conditions: mutual exclusion, no preemption, circular wait, and hold and wait. So among these 4 situations, we need to ensure that at least one of the one of these conditions should not hold, because these 4 conditions are necessary for a deadlock to occur. So now coming to the methods which are going to prevent the deadlock. How are we going to prevent the deadlock from occurring? That is, we need to be very careful about the request for the resources which are being made by the processes. Now what kind of resource request they are making, how many resources they are asking for, whether allocation of those resources to the processes, to the designated processes, is going to give us the system in a vulnerable state. That all things we need to check if we actually want to provide the if we actually want to prevent the deadlock thing. Now here is a very important term which is known as safe state, and the contrary on, or the antonym of this, is the unsafe state. Now safe state, as we can say, as you would have guessed, that a state or a system is known to be in the safe state if the system can allocate resources to each of the processes up to its maximum in some order and still avoid a deadlock. So for example, let us say we have 4 processes, P0, P1, P2 and P3, and we are aware of the request which are these processes are going to be made, or we are aware of the requirement of the resources which is going to be made by these processes. Now let us say we are going to say that process P1 is going to have its resources first allocated, then P3 maybe, then P0 and then P4, and within this sequence your system will not enter in the deadlock. That means we are able to avoid a deadlock within this or following this sequence of allocation of resources. Then if there is such a safe sequence which exists, then we can say that my whole system is in a safe state. On the contrary, if I am going to say that there are 4 processes P0, P1, P2 and P3, and if I am going to allocate the resources in the same sequence as if P0, P1, P2 and P3, then a system is going to be in an unsafe state, or it may enter into, or it will enter into a deadlock. Then this sequence is an unsafe sequence. So a system is going to be called in a safe state only if there is existence of a safe sequence. Now what is the safe sequence? Is that system can allocate resources to each process in some order. So basically a sequence of processes is a safe sequence for the current allocation or for the current state, such that for each Pi, for each process named as, let's say, Pi, the resource request that Pi can still make can be satisfied by the currently available resources plus all the resources held by Pj. So for example, I am having 2 processes P1 and P2, and P1 is holding some resources and some resources are available, and there exists one more process, let's say P2, and P2 is asking for some resources. Now whatever resources are currently available with P1 plus whatever resources are available in the system, if these two if the request of P2 can still be made if some resources are held with P1, whatever resources are available that are good enough to meet the requirement of P2, then we say that there is going to be a safe sequence or the state is safe. So we can say that in this situation, if the resources that Pi needs are not immediately available, now if they are available, we are going to allocate them just by after ensuring that system is not going to enter into an unsafe state. But there could be one situation that the resources that Pi needs are not immediately available. They can be available after some wait. That means, let's say P2 is requesting some resource which are being held by P1. P1 is obviously going to release that particular resource after some time. So we will be making that P2 to wait until all the earlier requests have which are the which are going on, they have finished. So when P1 has finished, P2 can obtain all of its resources, complete its designated task, and it is going to return the allocated resources, and then it can terminate. So that is particularly fine. But if in this situation we cannot allocate the resources immediately, some processes may need to wait. So here if Pi terminates, Pi plus 1 can obtain its needed resources and so on. So this is going to be a sequence in which your system is always in a safe state. If no such sequence exists, then the system state is said to be unsafe. Now a safe state, as you have got till this point, is not a deadlock state. Conversely, a deadlock state is an unsafe state. But can we say that all the unsafe states are deadlock? The answer to this question is no, not all the unsafe states are deadlock. An unsafe state may lead to a deadlock, but it will surely lead to a deadlock. That is not something which is kind of very sure. So if we can see the state space of the state spaces of the system, we have something which is the safe area, safe zone, we can say. We have something which is the unsafe zone, and within this unsafe zone there is a small part where the deadlock can occur. So, on the basis of this, here you can see the figure which is showing the state spaces of the system. Here we have safe state, we have unsafe state, and we also have the deadlock state. So, safe state is something which is very clear, we have a safe sequence here. Then we have an unsafe state, but all the unsafe states may not result in a deadlock, but deadlock, the whole of the deadlock part is lying inside the unsafe zone. So, that means if there is a deadlock, that is the unsafe situation, we all are aware. But if there is an unsafe situation that is going to result in a deadlock surely or positively, that we cannot say, that may or may not happen. So, this is going to be, we can say, a kind of a Venn diagram of the system having its all state spaces. So, here before allocation, if we want to avoid the deadlock, so before allocating any of the resources, we need to be very sure about the state of the system, that the system should remain in the safe state even after allocation of the requested resources, and if it is not, it is going into the unsafe state, then it may enter into a deadlock state also. Now coming to the next subtopic of today's agenda is resource allocation graph for deadlock avoidance. So here we are looking into the avoidance schemes under the deadlock handling topic. That means how are we going to avoid the deadlock. So one situation is you need to check the state of the system, whether it is a safe state or it is going towards the unsafe state. So how are we going to check that? We have set algorithms for that, but till this point I have just given you the terminology of safe state and unsafe state and the deadlock state space in between them. Now coming to more of the deadlock avoidance scheme, we have one which is based on the resource allocation graph. And what is this resource allocation graph? We have already seen in our previous lectures, this is a graph between resources, which is this is the graph which is having resources and processes as its node, and there will be edges. One is the request edge. If a process is requesting a resource, then from process to resource it is going to be a request edge. Another is the resource allocation edge, which is from resource to process, assuming that this resource has been allocated to this particular process. Now how are we going to use that resource allocation graph which we have seen for deadlock avoidance? Is we need to we can say we need to tweak it a little bit, but that means we need to modify the resource allocation graph in order to use that for or as a tool for deadlock avoidance. But this particular tool, which is resource allocation graph, or I can say modified resource allocation graph, used as a tool for deadlock avoidance, will be applicable only in the situation in which we have only one instance of each resource. If there are multiple instances of each resource, this modification of resource allocation graph and its usage as a deadlock avoidance tool is not going to work. So here is the limitation of this thing, that this is going to, or this strategy is going to work only in the case of one instance of only when system is having only one instance of each of the resources. Now in resource allocation graph, please recall that we have a request edge and the assignment edge, and here in the modification I am going to introduce a new type of edge which is known as the claim edge. Claim edge will go from a process to a resource. For example, a process from Pi, it can go to up to a resource R, let us say J. So a claim edge is from Pi to Rj. So this edge is going to we can say it is same as, or it is going to resemble a request edge in the direction. So please recall, when Pi or a process is requesting a resource, there is going to be a request edge from process to resource. Similarly, a claim edge is also sharing or also resembling the request edge in direction, but the representation is going to be through a dashed line. Then only we will be able to differentiate between the request edge and the claim edge. Now what are we going to do with this claim edge is, when a process Pi requests a resource, let us say Rj, then the claim edge Pi to Rj is going to be converted into a request edge. That means the claim edge is the state before the request edge. So we have a claim edge from Pi to Rj, then it will be converted into a request edge if Pi is going to request this. Similarly, when a resource, let us say Rj, is being released by Pi, so Pi has acquired the resource and now it is going to release the resource Rj, the assignment edge from Rj to Pi is going to be converted into the claim edge from Pi to R. So basically, first there is a claim edge, then it is going to be converted into the request edge, then that request edge will be kind of the assignment edge, and after kind of releasing of the resource from the by the process, the assignment edge is going to be converted into the claim edge again. So claim edge converted to the request edge, from request we have assignment edge, and from assignment we again have a claim edge. Now if we say we are going to start this cycle from the claim edge, so the question which comes first in our mind is, when are these claim edges are going to be introduced into the system? So there is a claim edge, and then we are going to convert it into the kind of request edge, and then assignment, and then so on and so forth. So when is the first, when your claim edge is going to be introduced into this resource allocation graph? So for this, one thing which is very important here is, the resources must be claimed a priori in the system. That means all the processes, before they start executing or before a start of their execution, all the claim edges must already appear in the resource allocation graph, and these claim edges will be shown as the dashed line, as I have already told you. So all the resources are claimed a priori into the system, and now let us say if a process Pi requests resource Rj. Now this is what a resource allocation graph is. That means a resource allocation graph as a tool for deadlock avoidance is, I can say that there is going to be a claim edge which is going to be a dashed edge if Pi is going to claim Rj in near future. And how are we going to come to that? How are we going to know that all the requests are kind of required to declare their claims in the system before they start execution? And before they start execution, because of this kind of declaration, I can say all the claim edges are available in the resource allocation graph. And now we are going to check for the cycle as we did earlier. The request can be granted only if converting a request edge to an assignment edge does not result in the formation of cycle in the resource allocation graph. We have seen this concept earlier also, that assignment edge is converted into the the request edge is converted into the assignment edge, and if there is a deadlock, if there is a cycle, that means this is going to result in a deadlock. Similarly, here we will say we will not convert the request edge into the assignment edge. That essentially means the request can be granted only if converting the request edge to an assignment edge does not result in the formation of cycle. That means we are actually checking for the system to be in the safe state, or we are checking for the safety of a state using a cycle detection algorithm, we can say. And if no such cycle exists, then the allocation of resources can be we can say can be granted, because this is going to leave the system in a safe state. But if there is a cycle, then the allocation will put the system into an unsafe state, and that allocation has to be put on hold. That means in that situation your PI or your process will have to wait for its request to be satisfied. So that is something, that means you have a claim edge will be converted into the request edge will be converted into the assignment edge, and assignment edge finally will be converted into the claim edge again. But conversion of request edge into assignment edge, that means allocation of the resource will only happen if there is no cycle in the deadlock after conversion of request edge into the assignment edge. If the cycle is found, that means this is a risky operation, we can say, or this is a risky step, then the allocation is going to put the system in an unsafe state, and then we will make our process to wait unless till other requests are going to other processes are going to release the resources. So here you can just have a feel of this resource allocation graph which is being used for deadlock avoidance. So here you can see that there are two claim edges which are shown by dashed lines, and apart from that there is an assignment edge and there is a request edge also. So if you can see, there is an edge from P2 to R1, that means process P2 is requesting the resource R1, and R1 from and the edge from R1 to P1 shows that this allocation has already happened. That means R1 has been given to P1 and P2 is still in the request mode for R1. Now if you can see the dashed edges here, we can see P2 is also requesting the resource R2, or also we can say the more proper term here is the we can say is claiming the resource R2. So P2 also needs R2, there is a claim edge, and P1 also needs R2. Now assuming I am going to convert all these two claim edges into the request edge and then finally request edge into the assignment edge. We are going to do this only if your system is not going to have a deadlock after this. So P1 to R2, for example, I am going to assign this R2 to P1, then what will happen? There will be a edge from R2 P1, and if I am going to assign this R2 to P2 as well, then also there is going to be edge, an assignment edge from R2 to P2. What does it mean? This is going to result in kind of we can say cycle, because R2 being one of the resource only, and I have already told you that there is only single instance of the resources. This is the situation in which your resource allocation graph or modified resource allocation graph is applicable. So here in these scenarios, we need to check about the existence of the cycle, and if the conversion of edges from one to another in the forward direction, I can say, is going to lead the system into an unsafe state, that means there will be a cycle here in the resource allocation graph. So if you can see, if you can recap this lecture, here we have seen that what are the situations in through which we can handle the deadlock situation or deadlock scenario. That means there could be avoidance scheme, there could be prevention scheme, there could be detection scheme which is going to come in the way when the deadlock has already occurred, then you need to detect and recover from it. Or another scenario, or the last scenario could be you just pretend that there are going to be no deadlocks. Then in case of deadlock avoidance, what all could be the tools? So there are still more tools coming in the next lectures. But what we have seen today was the modification of resource allocation graph in order to use it for deadlock avoidance. and here is a list of references which is being used for the preparation of lecture. Thank you for a patient hearing. I will see you in the next lecture. Thank you.